Hi there. In today's video, I'm going to be completing 2 more monument pieces. Because I used some concrete and plaster and rusty metal product on these pieces, I went ahead and prepared several substrates at the same time. So these 2 monuments were being prepared as alongside these mason jars. I do have a video of creating those mason jars, and I will put a link down below for that. But at this stage, I am just putting some chalk paint on. I let that dry, and at this point, I am now adding some plaster and rusty metal. I'm still learning and experimenting with how to attach different rusty items to my substrates. I like using the plaster wrap to secure the rusty metal pieces. However, it does tend to crumble off the plaster off of the actual kind of cheesecloth material. So I do keep those crumbs in a separate container there, and then I can add it with some water and thicken up some of the areas as needed to make sure that I am securing the pieces on there. I'm also still experimenting with the concrete and plaster. I found when I'm trying to use the concrete on its own, I sometimes struggle with getting it to set onto the different substrates that I'm using. So this last time that you're watching now, I decided to add a little plaster of Paris with the concrete mix. I didn't measure anything. I kind of was just eyeballing it, trying to get it to be a consistency that I wanted. I did struggle a little bit, but as it sat, it thickened up very fast and it wanted to dry very fast. I picked up this little set of silicone tools at the dollar store, I believe, and they work great for this material. Because I mixed the 2 things together, it was definitely kind of self-leveling a little bit, so I wasn't getting the texture right away that I was looking for. But again, as the longer that I worked with this, the more dry it became and the more it was setting. So my work time was very short, I found out, when I mixed the 2 materials together. So I'm going to keep trying different things. I've had a couple of suggestions from some viewers, so I do plan on trying their suggestions also. Hopefully that'll be coming up in another video soon. Eventually I had to kind of give up using the tool altogether and had to use my fingers because the mixture just became too thick. Once it got to a certain point, I ended up having to get rid of it because I had mixed up too much, and again, it just got too thick. So at this point I went ahead and opened up the tar. I like to watch the tar interact with the wet concrete and plaster mixture. Sometimes little bits of the concrete plaster will slide on top of the wet tar, and then eventually it will stay stuck there, and it creates a neat little impact or effect with the 2 materials interacting with each other. At this point I had peeled off the painter's tape that I had. I've added some more rusty bits and bobs, and I've let everything dry for actually a couple of weeks, only because I had done several substrates at the same time and I had some other things going on, and so these had ample time to dry. So at this stage, I went ahead and started applying the encaustic wax, and I was really enjoying watching it run. I wanted to create some runs with the wax on this particular piece. I have a couple of smaller torches. I had one that I really liked, but it tipped over one day into my vegetable oil and it just never recovered. I did go out and replace it, but I'm struggling with that one also. This little blue one that I start off using is one I picked up at the dollar store. And it's great for getting into little places. These pieces are a little bit hard to work on because I have so many things sticking out of them. I can't lay them flat very well. Depending on how many sides that I hammer the nails in or have the metal sticking out of, it just makes it a little more challenging when you're working with it to be able to lay it flat. What I did discover though was I did really enjoy heating the wax up from the top of the piece and letting it run down. Eventually that blue torch, I started having some issues with it, so I picked up this medium-sized one. Both of those smaller torches were giving me fits all day as I was working on this piece. So I kind of just keep going back and forth between different torches. A lot of the reason why I'm using the torch is that, again, I'm wanting to get the wax to run, and it works a little bit better to create those with the torches than it does with the heat gun. If you look closely, you may notice that sometimes the hot wax, the molten wax, will reactivate that tar just a little bit and create a little bit of a tone. And I know that this happens. However, this one I got a little more than what I wanted, so I went ahead and scraped it back. But if you just need to be watching for that as you work with it and kind of work with it instead of against it. At this point, I went ahead and pulled a little bit of material that I have on the side. It is cotton, and I went ahead and dipped that into the wax encaustic and added that onto the piece. At this point, I went ahead and started using my white encaustic that I have melted on my palette over there, and just started adding that into random places onto this particular monument. By this time, you probably know, if you've watched my videos, I like a lot of texture, and one of the challenging things with the encaustic is creating the texture and then having to do your fusing. And when you fuse, the encaustic will become re-molten in some areas, so you lose a little bit of the texture that you create. So it's kind of a game of adding it, fusing it, adding some more. Just kind of, I was going back and forth here between the white and the clear encaustic, trying to build up a nice strong texture. Now I'm going to go ahead and mix up these two blue, it's a turquoise blue and a cobalt blue and a white, and create a color, and then I'm going to go ahead and put that onto the piece and remove the excess with the vegetable oil. I'm making some marks into the wax on certain areas so that they will fill with the blue point paint, and then when I clear it off, you'll see all of the different marks and texture that I'm making. just restating the fact here that any of these steps that you would normally do become a little more challenging with all of the things sticking out of this piece. The nails I didn't necessarily have to add when I did. I could have waited and put those in more towards the end, but I like to have the visual of where those are while I'm creating the piece. This right here, what I'm doing is taking the white encaustic and, as you can see, kind of putting it against the edge to really create some good strong drips and runs, and then I'm enhancing those with the torch. I have these little metal scrunch pads that you would normally use in your kitchen for cleaning dishes, and I like to push those into the wax and create some random shapes, and I also use some other tools there. And then I went ahead and grabbed some tar that I have in a cup, and it's a little bit dry, but when you put a little bit of vegetable oil on it, it will reactivate it slightly. And then I'm creating a wash with that tar mixture, putting it on and then wiping it back off. At this point, I switched to my heat gun. As I start to get towards the end of the encaustic process of a piece, I usually will, if I'm not already using the heat gun, I'll switch to that because it's a lighter fuse, and I can control it, I guess, a little bit better than I can the flame, and make sure that I don't melt the wax too much. All of that texture that I was able to create with the plaster and concrete, I hadn't really done too much to that section yet. Just had added the clear encaustic over it, but it's really wonderful when you take the fan brush and lightly touch all of those textures. It just enhances the richness of those textures and really brings those out. At this point, I decided to try something a little different. I use thread often, but I have this string. It's a cotton string, and I wanted to go ahead and put that onto this piece. It's a little bit bigger than the thread, so I had to keep that in mind when I was working with it, but definitely added it the same way I did the thread. I dip one end into the wax or the encaustic and tack it down, and then I just randomly wind it around all of the different things I have sticking out of the piece. I went ahead and tied a knot on that where it was around that nail, and then I took just a little bit of encaustic and put that onto the knot and fused it. So that way it made it nice and secure. So at this point I decided to go ahead and add some gold foil to the piece. Normally when I lay it on here and rub my fingers on it, it will pull off some of the gold, and I like how kind of random that is when I do that. But as I continued to work with the sheet, it started not working quite as well. I'm not sure if it was picking up the oil, the vegetable oil maybe, or maybe my wax was still just a little bit warm. I was able to get it to come off of there, but I did struggle with it just a little bit more than I anticipated. After I added a little bit more gold foil, I decided that this one was just about done. So I will show that to you here quickly, and then I will move on to the second piece, working it as well. I was really enjoying the contrast that this piece already had between the chalk paint and the plaster and the tar, and so I decided to go more of a white theme on this one and not add any of the blue. So at this point I'm just adding some white encaustic into different areas of the piece. Wanting to try to pull the piece together, again I go back to that tar mixture and use that as a wash over the piece. It just kind of helps bring it all together. By the time I got these both done, although I liked them both, I did end up liking this one just a little bit better. I really liked the color scheme of it and how it came together. I was definitely struggling a little bit with the gold foil at this point. I did have some residue on the back side of it, but there was so much still left on the sheet. I was just determined to try to make it work. So I just kind of kept at it. I know that's probably kind of boring to watch, but eventually I got enough on there that I liked where that was going. And at this point on this piece, I went back to the thread and wanted it to be not as bold with the thread, and so went ahead and pulled a bunch of that off. Same thing as before, put the end of it in the encaustic, tack it down, and then just randomly wind it around all of the things that I have sticking out of the piece. So as I finish with the thread on this piece, that will just about wrap this piece up. I will show you both of them here and how they turned out. I thank you again for watching and really appreciate your support. Hope that you'll give me a like or a comment and give me a subscribe if you've not done that already. If you want to see more pictures of these two pieces, you can check out my Instagram. I have changed that and my Instagram handle is now LDF-Designs Art. That's over on Instagram. Thanks again for watching. I hope you enjoyed the process and keep creating.